Hi guys, my name is Maram and I recently took my Plab 1 in November, and this is basically a video where I'll give you a bit of a breakdown of what I did and what I think you would need for the Plab exam. So there are only three main things that you're going to need for the exam, and I don't recommend having too many things going on. So choose one thing in each of the three categories, and that's pretty much what you would need. The first category is question banks. So you would need a question bank to be practicing, and that is super important. It gets you used to the way the exam is structured. It gets you used to getting to know where your mistakes are, what are the problems, and so on. So it's super important that you start with a question bank. There are a few question banks you can use. There is the 1,700 questions Q bank that's available online. That one is completely free, but I think it's a little outdated. So if you want to stay up to date with the exam and the newer exam questions, you might want to pay for a question bank. This is still a valid and a really good resource depending on your budget. Then we have the Pastest question bank, and the Pastest question bank I personally used mainly because I got a free subscription for a full year, and I started earlier with it. One of the things that is available on it is that it has really good extended explanations, much better than the other ones. So you would be able to read about the full topic in details when you made a mistake, and I really liked that. It allowed me to explore some of the topics that I was really weak in during med school. So I would also really recommend that if you're trying to start really early on, or if your basics aren't that great. But for someone who already has their basics really set down, you wouldn't need that much. For the Pastest question bank, another thing that's good about it is that it's a lot cheaper. So you could get a 1 year subscription with the same money where you would get like a 3 month subscription elsewhere. So that is also one of the other factors that you could put into your breaking down. Another thing I also liked about Pastest, but it might be a good and a bad thing for you, is that the questions are a lot harder than the Plab exam. So their questions are sometimes very hard, sometimes they're very detailed. That could help if you're trying to know your weaknesses and know what problems you have, but it might discourage some people, so do keep that in mind. And the third one, and the one that obviously is everyone's favorite, is the Plabable question banks. So the Plabable question banks are the blueprint, to be honest. They are very similar to the exam. Because of that, I would recommend to start solving them when you're really close to the exam time. So let's say 3 months, nothing longer than that. It is a bit expensive when compared to other question banks, but they are really great, so I would say go for those. You might not need other resources, but however, I will say this again, it depends on how well you study these topics the first time round. So if you never studied a chapter before, it might be difficult to just jump straight into Plabable. But if you have a good basic on that topic, you just need to fill the blanks and fill the areas where you kind of forgot or things that you never fully understood. They're great. So just in general, I wouldn't recommend starting too early. Starting 3 months or 2 months before the exam is more than enough in my opinion. I personally was just kind of touching the topics and reading a little bit ever since a few months before, but I only started seriously studying towards the last 2 months, and maybe even the last month was when I was putting my all into it. So you don't need that much time. Okay, so the second thing that you would need are notes. And those notes are not going to be your everything, but they are really helpful because it helps you fill in the blanks. Because basically, when you study medicine in a different country, it might be a little difficult to kind of really understand how things work in the UK, and these notes kind of help with that. I personally think my favorite is Plab Keys. And the reason why I love Plab Keys is because it is kind of like a question and answer type of way, and that makes it a much more active way to study. It repeats the topic more than one time. You'll see the same topic being explained in different types of questions, so that really helped me personally, especially when it comes to boring topics. So topics like ENT, topics that I never really liked, I would use Plab Keys. Sometimes I would reference to Plab Gems. Plabable Gems are mainly, I would use them for topics where I wanted to understand the bigger picture, because as I said, Plab Keys and the question banks show you a zoomed in version. You don't really get to see the whole picture. So sometimes it's really helpful to go to Plab Gems and look in the whole picture, but I don't think you need both. You could just choose one based on your study style and go with that. There's also the extended explanations on the Pastest, so I would sometimes read the explanation that they have, and they're really helpful for me personally. If you already have the question bank, that would help you a lot as well, because they're more extended. They give a full overview, starting from the symptoms, the pathophysiology, and all of the details. And sometimes, only sometimes, and I'm specifying this because it's so rare that I've done this only like once or twice, is to reference to an actual book. I've referenced to the Oxford handbooks, mainly the medicine one. I've used it mainly for like things that I thought were a bit more complicated, things that I couldn't really fully process, or I was struggling, or I was making a lot of mistakes in. Then I would like go and study the topic from the Oxford handbook. It's really helpful to again understand the full view and like have a more well-rounded understanding of the topic. For example, I used it with diabetes because I kept messing up the drugs. So I went there and it made it so much clearer, so much easier. So sometimes you do need to reference to that, but again, this is like a last resort. So don't like directly go into the Oxford handbook and try to study the whole thing. You'll never be done. So only go to it when you have a specific problem, you already identified the problem and you want to fix it. Okay, so the third resource that I think is honestly the best, the one thing that made a huge difference for me, is the Plabable Big Mocks. I started using them when I had 5 or 6 days left to the exam. So that last week I did nothing but solving mocks. The mocks are super helpful because they are kind of like a way for you to get a well-rounded idea of where your problems are again. It helps like solidify some of the problems you had in the past. You feel a bit more prepared. The idea of the mock is to also help with your time management, because time management is one of those big issues you have in the exam. You need to know how to solve all 180 questions in 180 minutes. So that also helps a lot, and it gives you kind of an idea of where your score is going to be. But again, it depends fully on luck, so don't fully depend on the mock, because sometimes you get like different distribution of topics than you would have in the mock versus in the exam. Okay, so these are like the three main things that you need to know for your Plab exam, and having a balance of all three is more than enough. You need to also have like a kind of a schedule, and just to know what you're trying to do every single day. And the fourth thing I want to talk about, the last thing I want to talk about, is general tips I want to give for the exam, because I know that just having the resources is not enough. So the first thing is to know the general exam structure and to know how to solve MCQs, or multiple choice questions, because as I like to always say, the L in Plab stands for linguistic, which means that part of it is about analyzing the question and understanding the question properly. There are some keywords in the question, like questions like first, what is the diagnostic, what is the next step. These kinds of questions or these kinds of keywords help you understand what you're supposed to do, and so you need to really pay attention to those and think in that multiple choice question mindset. The second thing is to also, again, like it's part of the first thing I said, which always, whenever you're looking at a question, know what to scan for. So we're always scanning for keywords that are, for example, hinting at contraindications or hinting at something specific in that patient's profile. No information that they give you in the question is useless. Everything that they're giving you is they're giving it to you for a reason. So try to like understand what they're trying to say. The third thing is to not overthink it. A lot of the questions are very easy and people tend to like overthink them, but that is not the way they are. Some questions are easy because in any exam there would be easy questions and hard questions and questions in the middle. So don't miss out on the easy marks simply because you're overthinking these questions. If you know it, you know it. Don't listen to people who tell you that specific topics are more common in the exam than other topics. I know some people who do that and they go into the exam with 10 like topics that are high yield and topics that are low yield. I don't think that is the case at all. The exam has enough parts of all of the chapters. You can get unlucky and the topics that you weren't studying show up more, and so on. So make sure you have passed through everything. It doesn't have to be more detailed. It doesn't have to be going into them like becoming an expert in that topic, but at least passing through it enough to be able to recognize the answers when you do see them. So yeah, never listen to the people who tell you, oh yeah, the topic will never show up on the exam. These are the topics that show up and these are the ones that don't. Or like this one gets 20 questions and this one gets 5. That is not the case anymore. One thing I noticed from taking the exam towards the end of 2023 is that the questions are kind of distributed in a very weird way that you wouldn't expect. So make sure that you are going through all of the topics at least once. You don't have to be an expert in every topic, but at least having enough basic knowledge in all of them, because they don't want you to be a specialist in one topic. They just want you to be on a good level on all of the topics. Number 5 is time management. You need to get used to handling your time management. What I recommend is that you go into the exam with your own strategy of what you're going to do with the time. I had a strategy where I already knew which questions I'm good at and which questions I'm bad at. So I had some questions that I was solving in half a minute because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do some other questions in 1 minute. So for example, the epidemiology questions where you might have to calculate the questions that need you to read an x-ray or read an ECG or anything like that, those are going to take more than a minute. So you need to have already prepared for that and kind of solved some questions faster so that you can have more time there. In the exam, the good thing is that there's like a really big timer available to you at a very clear view, so you can look at it every once in a while. And so managing your time, super important. You don't have the time to sit down and think too much about a question. You don't have the time to skip a question and come back to it. Just solve and keep going. What I recommend is during the days where you're doing the mock, put yourself under exam conditions, try to do it the same way you would have done it in the exam to just check if your strategy is working or not. The last tip is to just trust your gut. Really, you need to be confident. You need to trust your gut so that you're not changing your answers over and over again, or that you're just like confusing yourself and like making stupid mistakes. That is also one of those problems that happen. And what I would do is basically, again, prepare yourself for it. So if I do have a theory, I have a theory that, okay, this type of question is solved this way, I'm not going to be trying that theory in the exam for the first time. I'm going to be trying it a whole week before the exam, making sure, okay, does this strategy work? Does that strategy work? It's all about having a really good exam strategy when you're going into the exam, and that's why it's so important to do those mocks before you go into the exam. That is all for this video. I hope you liked it. If you do have any questions about the Plab 1 exam or anything else you want to know more about, please do leave something in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.